Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Chaplain. This will be a combination Pastor Reacts and Chaplain Explains video, reacting to the topic of the flat earth theory and where it intersects with religion. This is part one of 3 videos I plan on doing on the flat earth, as well as another one on the related topic of the manufactured conflict between science and religion. The other 2 parts in the Flat Earth series will be one short and hopefully humorous and satirical take on some of the flerfers, and the other a Chaplain Explains video on the history of the Flat Earth myth within Christianity. One day, a while back, YouTube suggested a Simon Dan video, where he debunked a silly flat earther with much English sass that we Americans find so entertaining. That led me to Katz, Professor Dave, FTFE, Creaky, and Team Skeptic. Their videos were quite entertaining and informative, except for one thing. Whenever one of the flerfs would quote the Bible, my brain would hurt and I would scream, "No, no, no!" And no offense to the other debunkers, they are not properly equipped to respond to those flerfs' faulty hermeneutics, which is my field, in the same way I am not properly equipped to do a science-based debunk like they do. But I do have whiteboards like Katz does. I figured that I would find that they hadn't done proper research, as they like to call it, but is really just watching YouTube videos in an echo chamber. So I have felt driven to respond to those flerfs. Nathan Thompson, Nathan Roberts, Hans Wormhat, Woketown, J.M. Truth, Joey Roche, D.I.T.R.H, and many others. To start off, I want to make it clear that the Bible is not a book of science. It does not teach mathematics, chemistry, physics, or biology. The closest it gets, in my opinion, and some of my peers disagree, is hygiene and sanitation, with the kosher and clean unclean rules that turned out to be scientifically sound. But anyway, the Bible is about history and pain and wisdom and love and redemption and ethics and comfort and challenges, and above all, it is about faith. What I intend this video to show is that the Bible does not support a flat earth. So those who push this falsity are either grifters like Roberts and Thompson, are apparently pathological like J.M. Truth and Roche, or more innocently just ignorant of what the Bible actually says and means because of language and translation issues. The firmament is not a real thing. It's a misunderstanding based on how the Bible was translated from the original Hebrew into various vernaculars through history. The idea of a firmament that the flerfs are peddling is not a Judeo-Christian concept, but an ancient Egyptian polytheistic concept that influenced translators at one point thousands of years ago. And the irony is that religious scholars see those verses that flerfs misuse to say that the Bible is a flat earth book are in actuality more fitting to support the reality of a globe earth. And while it is overinterpretation to say that the Bible supports a sphere, nowhere does it say that the earth is flat. There are many things in creation that are not spoken about in the Bible, and yet are still obviously true, and we must not ignore them, or make ourselves blind to these truths. That is where the Deuteronomical test comes in, where, while it's specifically applied to prophets, we can apply it to our own lives, and if you, it actually kind of sounds like the scientific method even. If something is proven true, it is to be accepted as true. And I did a Chaplain Explains video on this, link right here. Alright, so I went to Nathan Roberts' website, where he peddles a book and other products, claiming that there are over 240 Bible verses that support a flat earth. I figured that I would find some translation issues like idioms or allusions or other figurative things or just simple misunderstandings. And I would respond collegially, referring to Roberts as Brother Nathan and recognizing him as a fellow Christian. But what I found made me angry. I wanted this to be polite and cordial, but since one Nathan is trying to profit from this fraud, while another Nathan was arrested for harassing elementary school kids with screamings full of falsehoods, it hasn't ended that way. And, well, there was all that, what I suspected, to be sure, but also a lot of misrepresentation, confirmation bias, and even intellectual dishonesty. So much so that I had to use a thesaurus or else overuse those adjectives. I may have gone a bit overboard on that. I determined that going through all of Roberts' so-called claims should cover all the flerfs that misuse the Bible, and then using proper hermeneutical tools to hopefully accomplish a more accurate exegesis. You know, the over 240 Bible verses that proves a flat earth shtick reminds me of Eric Dubay and his debunked 200 proofs of a flat earth. Now, because this is going to be a long one, which is unavoidable, and because I want this to be definitive, and even used as a reference for the debunkers against those misusing the Bible, I therefore will put bookmarks in the description so you can jump around the video or skip portions as you wish. Any feedback on which sections should be included in a shorter condensed version of this video, please leave it in the comments. And now the chaplain will explain how this examination of Roberts' claims was done. First things first, an overview of my methodology and impressions of Roberts after going through it all. Roberts used the King James Version translation, which is not considered a scholarly translation. It is better described as majestic, a grand poetic translation. It sounds very familiar to us. It's what's used in TV and films all the time. Another issue with the King James Version is that it is the sometimes shoddy translation. This is the version that used unicorn instead of rhinoceros or auroch, because to the English translators, a single-horned quadruped had to be a unicorn, like on a certain coat of arms. It has also been repeatedly filtered, so to speak. The original Hebrew, Aramaic, or Masoretic text of the Old Testament was translated into Greek, the Septuagint, by 70 Jewish scholars in Alexandria, which was then translated into the Latin Vulgate by Jerome, and then it gets into English with the King James Version. Roberts also cherry-picked from the Matthew's Bible, which is like a proto-King James Version, and then also the English Standard Version when it suited him. However, the preferred scholarly translation is the New Revised Standard Version, or NRSV. It has a more direct line to the original text, while noting the differences with the Septuagint, the Vulgate, with the Dead Sea Scrolls, and various other manuscripts. It is the translation used in seminaries and divinity schools. I remember one day in Old Testament hermeneutics, when asked, a student was got up and read from the Bible, and the copy they had with them was King James, and there was a collective groan in the lecture hall. All right. Now, the cherry picking shows that Roberts utilized the parallel Bible function on his online Bible, which I think he referenced using Bible Hub. And a quick note to Bible Hub users, on the pull-down menu, NRSV is at the very bottom under the field Bible Study Tools. Now, using the parallel Bible is great to compare translations of verses side by side to help comprehend what the translators are trying to get across. For example, as a kid, I was always confused by the start of the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. We have all heard this. And what was going on in my head was, I thought that the speaker, David, was saying he didn't want the Lord to be his shepherd. And I'm like, that can't be right. And it wasn't until I saw it in parallel that I understood it. From the New International Version, it goes, Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. All right, I get it now. I understand. All right. Now with Roberts choosing those three translations, combined with some other stuff he did that I will get into soon, suggests to me that he just did a keyword search and picked what suited him. Now, King James Version and English Standard Version, I can see they are commonly used enough, but toss in a 16th century translation that, while important in the history of the development of the English translation of the Bible, it's not really used anymore, and nor is it used in this sort of situation. How I did my exegesis for this was to start with the NRSV Study Bible and read the pericope, check the footnotes to see if there are any translation issues or idiomatic considerations, and the brief commentary. Now, because Roberts and I are using two different translations, that is effectively a parallel Bible. But I do have a couple of actual 4 translation ones. And just double checking. And yeah, so I got 8 right over here. And there are various ones online that line up dozens of translations of them for free. Next, I consulted the Interlinear Bible, the most literal English translation, where the original Masoretic, Hebrew, Aramaic, and Koine Greek are presented with the English word below it and the Strong's reference number above. Then the direct English translation in the margin without any interpretation, only switching the word order to match English grammatical standards. 3 lines, hence interlinear. Finding the Strong's number is the key. Each word in Hebrew, Aramaic, and Koine is assigned a unique number. Then, using Strong's Concordance, you can see every use of that specific word in every verse it appears, and all the different meanings, including combinations of words or phrases that modify the meaning. And if different words were translated into the same word in English, take for example Genesis 3, the forbidden fruit. What is it? What does the text actually say? Not apple, just fruit. We think it's an apple because Western artists used an apple in depictions of the Garden of Eden, and it just stuck. Now, according to my Old Testament hermeneutics professor, Dr. John Collins, the Strong's number for that, it was taken and checked against other uses of that exact word, fruit, in other ancient Hebrew texts, and from the context clues from there, we know that it was actually an apricot being referenced in Genesis 3. Now that's some neat detective work. Next, I used Bible dictionaries to check out key words, then the commentaries, both long and short form, and also specialized books, as well as online for periodicals. While doing this, I considered through whom we have received the text. That is source criticism, what genre and purpose it is, that's form criticism, and why the text is like this, that's redaction criticism. In this React, form criticism is going to come up a lot. This is the proper and professional version of what Roberts did, which was apparently simple keyword searches of the Bible in not the original language. Like searching for something in a document written after a game of telephone. This seems long and involved, and it should be, especially when using the Bible to make such grand pronouncements about the nature of reality. Honestly, if I was just doing a sermon, this would be overkill, but serious hermeneutics, yeah, all this should be done minimum. This is part of what made me so angry at Roberts' list. And now, it's back to the pastor to react. Roberts started with quoting John 3:12. It's not directly related to any proof, and I get what he is trying to do, as many religious-based treatises and writings start with a verse. But it is taken out of context, and is one of the many passages he used to try to manipulate people into taking him seriously or accepting his misinterpretations and misrepresentations. It's really about Jesus and Nicodemus going back and forth about signs, and that half of the chapter is about faithfulness. Now I will start with the unrelated stuff that has been distorted and embellished as proofs to clear away that noise. The vast majority of his list, honestly. Then we can focus on the serious stuff. I will present his claims just as he had presented them, using screenshots so that there is no way I can be accused of misrepresenting him. I need to note there is a bunch of repetition, luckily allowing batches at a time being dealt with. So, feel free to grab an intoxicating beverage. Couldn't hurt. Alright, first claim is that Genesis 1 describes the earth being created before the sun. 1, so what? And 2, it doesn't say sun. And it says light before water and dry land. Then the luminaries, the stars. I honestly don't know what he is on about, but a reading of the chapter does not seem to match his claim. Next, that the universe is complete, not expanding, based on Genesis 2:1, saying that the heavens and the earth were finished. This is unrelated to his claim, and it does not preclude an ever-expanding universe, and it doesn't even say universe. Anyway, so is this lack of imagination, maybe confirmation bias? And think about it. A living organism is ever growing. A baby is made. It is done and created, but it continues to grow. Or take a clock. A smith makes it, finishes it, but it keeps going. Then he took Ezekiel 45:1 wrongly in a way that made me facepalm. This pericope is referencing the setting aside of a large area of land as a holy district. It's creating a sacred space, like a temple or tabernacle or church or chapel, separating the clean and divine from the unclean and the profane. Roberts claimed that since it does not measure curvature, the world must be flat. But it doesn't say flat. This is more of the usual flat earth misunderstanding, reality, and creation. The world is massive. If you zoom in far enough on a soccer ball, it will look flat. He continued with this fallacy by citing Jesus' Sermon on the Plain, the Gospel of Luke's version of the Sermon on the Mount. And he did that semantic wordplay that flerfers like to do because it was on a plane. This is some serious stretching, man. Level is, yeah. Even more of this balderdash with his claim that paths are straight, not curved. He cited 12 verses from across the Bible, which were all along the lines of, walk a straight path and do not stumble, or lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Being figurative and giving directions. It's just how we speak. This has revealed much to me of Robert's methodology and how inadequate and amateurish it was, as well as being more than a little dishonest. It became clear that he only did a keyword search for straight, but did not look at anything else in the verse or around it. There are verses next to the ones he cited that speak of the same concept, but do not use the word straight. And he did not cite them, though he should have from his perspective. And here's another way he was being misleading. He cited verses that were quoting verses he had already cited and counted them as if they were unique. He should have noted that. In the spirit of the Birdman, I ask, you padding the verse count, bro? I think you're padding the verse count. Next, he quoted Job 37:10, in which Elihu is speaking about God's power in nature and emphasizing the importance of water in Hebrew culture. Roberts uses it as the aquatic version of his plain latherskite. It's just level. He claimed that earthquakes shake the earth and does not move. I don't know what he's on about here either. The three pericopes speak of earthquakes, but do not mention that the earth did not move. We have David's Song of Thanksgiving for being delivered from his enemies, a proclamation against Babylon by Isaiah, and the opening of the sixth seal in Revelation. This seems to go beyond stretching and is just mendacious. Did he think no one would check his work? Next, he cited verses that he claimed show that the earth is fixed and immovable. And he has misunderstood every one of them. In 4 of them, the word for moved, and do not expect accurate pronunciations throughout this, mout, Strong's number 4131, show that it is moved as in destroyed or fall down. And that's for 1 Chronicles 16:30, Psalm 93 and 96, and 104. What is hilarious about this is that Roberts repeatedly asserted that he studied the Hebrew and Greek words, but he obviously did not. He also pulled the same stunt where the Chronicles verse is actually quoting Psalm 96. Then Psalm 33:9, that is a poetic reference to listening and is describing music in heaven. Like, you were moved by the music. Quick sidebar. You got to understand the types of language being used in each book to help you understand what's going on. That's basically form criticism. Anyway, psalms are songs. They have to be understood as hymns, as musical poetry. Then there are the prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Amos. The language found in their books is prophetic, so it's figurative and metaphorical, full of similes and allusions. Honestly, the same is true for a lot of the Bible, because it is trying to get across a message to us that we keep on not getting. Okay, pin in that. What happened? Alright, Psalm 119, 89 to 90. This psalm is about the covenantal relationship between God and the people. The word it stands, Amad, number 5975. And here, it has a more legal usage and sense. The covenant or contract has to do with the law, the Torah. So it's saying that the covenant still stands. It's still in effect. Isaiah 14:7 is an example of Roberts' deceptiveness or academic inadequacy, or possibly both. This pericope comes from a taunt directed towards Babylon. It says, "The whole earth is at rest and quiet. They break forth into singing." Besides being obvious that this has nothing to do with flat earth, it's saying that everything is peaceful. If you read the preceding verses, it describes how the bad, chaos-causing people of Babylon have been struck down, so the world is now at peace. I was hoping that I could go quickly through these, but Roberts' work is so bad that it demands long explanations in places. Isaiah 45:12. Nothing to do with this. Zechariah 1:11. An angel says that the earth is at peace. Shakat, number 8252, meaning quiet and rest. Hebrews 11:10 is referencing the foundation of the city of Jerusalem, not the earth. 2 Peter 3:5, again, there's nothing there. Psalm 46:10 was singled out for special notice. Be still and know God. The key word there, still, rappa, number 7503, means to hang limp, sink down, be feeble, abandoned, show oneself slack, idle, stay, give respite, lazy. So yeah, it's referring to a person. Roberts asserted that the earth has pillars and hangs on nothing. He cited 1 Samuel 2:8, Hannah's prayer, because she says, "For the pillars of the earth are the Lord's, and on them he has set the world." Pillars, or matsuk number 4690, is used in 5 different ways in the Bible. And here, in this case, its use is symbolic of strength and support. Psalm 75:3 is another example, according to the HarperCollins Bible Dictionary, of poetic and liturgical language being used, and Roberts not factoring the form into his analysis. The other 2 citations are from Job 9:6 and 26:7. And here, Roberts has failed to consider the context. In 9:6, Job is having an argument with Bildad about Torah and is quoting a psalm. By the time we get 26:7, Job is ranting and sassing Bildad. He's being sarcastic. And another thing, Job is in the wrong anyway. That's the whole point of the book. Next, Roberts claimed Earth has a face, a geometric flat surface, and then does the same with water and sky, citing a total of 34 verses. I went through every one of them, so you don't have to. Ah, Richard Hammond. Alright. Face is pane, and is paired with other words like ap and ayin. And it is very common, and especially used in idioms. Therefore, he's taking idioms seriously. Ever see Robin Hood Men in Tights? Robin calls for attention by quoting Shakespeare and Julius Caesar, and when he got to "lend me your ears," the crowd, taking him seriously, popped off their ears and threw them at Robin. That's like what Roberts did here. Let me interject. In Hebrew, many words have double or symbolic meanings. Easy example is to read the Song of Solomon. That's not his hand that he's putting into her lock, if you catch my drift. And her garden or her channel is really her, and he is enjoying her fruit. Context and translation matters. Switching to the New Testament, an example is the number of the beast. What is it? From the Latin, we get 666, and that's what most people think. However, from the Koine Greek, we get 616. These languages have double meanings to words and numbers, and this cannot be ignored. Roberts did the same exact thing in his next claim, The Earth Has Ends, citing 40 verses. Now, I am quite vexed because I did due diligence checking every single verse, and the inexperience here was worse than I thought. Anyways, the common idiom, to the ends of the earth. How often have you heard someone vow to chase someone to the ends of the earth? This is an idiom that is actually translated over the millennia and through different languages and still makes sense and mean the same thing. Roberts must think we're stupid. I would like to highlight Job 38:12-14 as an example. This pericope references dawn seizing the end or edge of the earth. Well, on a spherical earth, dawn arrives at the distant horizon, end, or edge of a person's point of view in a fixed position. And since we are on this one, I would like to note how it describes the earth taking shape like clay under a seal. This is more applicable to either a disk or a sphere, but it may be saying more about the Earth's rotation or its manufacture than its shape. He did it again with his next claim about the idiom, the four corners of the earth. We still use this one today. It's an idiom referring to the most distant parts of the earth. In context, the idiom usage is implied, and the Hebrew word for corner, kanaf, number 3671, meaning wings or extremities, and it is used figuratively every time it is used in the Old Testament. And if Roberts really wants to take it literally, the Interlinear Bible says, the four wings of the earth. So, will Roberts now assert that the earth has four wings? Or will he recognize the figurative nature of phrases? I gotta highlight something else here. He cited 7 pericopes. 4 are the idiom, but the others, now I triple checked the citations to be sure. Jeremiah 9:26 and 25:23, Jeremiah is talking about the corners of foreigners' beards. And in Ecclesiastes 1:6, Kohelet is talking about the winds coming from all over that go round and round. I have to ask, is this sneakiness or inexperience? Oh, and yet again with the next claim. Who'da thunk it? This claim is the sun moves, not the earth. When you check most of the passages he cited, they are just describing sunrise. We talk and we refer to sunrise even today because it is an expression. Roberts is projecting, but I'm a professional. So here's due diligence by the numbers. In the words of a mouthy merc, let's count them down. Okay, we got this. 37 Old Testament passages using Shemesh, number 8121, meaning sunrise. Now we got 5 Old Testament passages, and it's still using Shemesh in there, but it is Marak Shemesh, meaning sun, sun rising, sun, and it's referring to the direction. Next, we go over to the New Testament. 4 New Testament passages using Helios, number 2246, and it just means sun. 3, we get a little bit more formal here. So it's Shemesh Marash, 4217, 8121, and 180. 1886.1. That's the. Now it's referring to sunrise and sun, and it's referring to it as the time of day. And then, for some reason, we have two Old Testament passages using D.I.T.R.H, number 2272, and its meaning, it's sun, itch, or any eruptive skin rash. And I find it funny that he included that one. And I remind you that he keeps claiming that he studied the Hebrew and Greek and did all this work, and I don't know about this one, buddy. Anyway, going through the list in the Strong's Concordance, I noticed a pattern. And so I am fairly certain that Roberts just did a keyword search for sun and rise and sun and down because of what he didn't cite. Very similar passages that describe the same motion but didn't specifically contain the English words rise or down. Roberts did not differentiate between the literal sunrise and sundown, denoting time, and the figurative or the metaphorical. For example, Jeremiah 15:9, a prophecy about the downfall of Jerusalem and the southern kingdom of Judah. Or Micah 3:6a, a prophecy about the end of prophecy. Or Ephesians 4:26, where the Apostle Paul advises the Ephesians, do not let the sun go down on your anger. It is a common expression used every day, and the non-literal uses, I can't even with this guy. There is no confusion by any rational person as to the meaning, and again, I question Roberts's integrity, especially because he's trying to make money off of this. You padding the verse count, bro? I think you're padding the verse count. He then went off on another combative and manipulative aside, more akin to a cult leader than an actual Christian. And the whole thing is wrong because of his failure at form criticism, not recognizing or considering parts of speech like simile, metaphor, allusion, idioms, and expressions. All right, let's get through the poppycock so we can deal with the real issue. Roberts claimed that the sun stopped moving, citing 4 pericopes. Isaiah 60:20. It's a metaphor, and it's saying that God would be the city's light. That speaks to my congregational heritage, reminding me of Jonathan Edwards' treatise called A Supernatural and Divine Light. And that's why when you go into a congregational church built before 1900, the walls are all pastel, and most of the wall is taken up by windows to let as much of the supernatural and divine light in. Anyway, all right. Job 9:7. Job is talking about how God is greater than some rando off the street. Joshua 10:12-14. It's explicitly quoting the book of Jasher, which is not in the Bible, and it's poetic, talking about the perception of time. Habakkuk 3:11. It's a second-hand account of the prophet's prayer, and it's part of a theophanic report. And those divine things can be really difficult to adequately describe. Then he cited 2 Kings 28-11. The sun went backwards one time, and it was only to authenticate the prophet Isaiah's prophecy to King Hezekiah. Remember the Deuteronomical test? And so this is about the deliverance of Jerusalem. And to be clear, I meant deliverance as to save the city from destruction, and not that someone was going to actually deliver the city on a plate or in a pizza box. Because Roberts takes figurative expressions literally. For the Three Musketeer fans. I do have Athos. He is finally starting to behave himself, lying down just off camera. Though I think Porthos is about to start some trouble over here with probably Bailey. Anyway, alright, so Roberts then got to stretching real hard, claiming that the moon has its own light. It's an expression for pity's sake. Alright, Genesis 1:6 is the unique pericope, but it describes the moon regulating light, not creating it, and it's clearly calendrical in its purpose. The rest of the cited pericopes are all prophecies, written in the poetic prophetic language, and either Robert's mendacity or ineptitude is on display again. He cited Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel. And there are two types of usages. One, predicting doom for Babylon, or two, describing God's glory, repeating similar phrases. So, which rolls off the tongue better and sounds prettier? Moonshine, or no longer reflects light from the sun. See, prophets had a way with words and used them to get people to listen to them and get their messages across. A beautiful and artful turn of phrase is more likely to be listened to. For example, recall the movie Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. There was a bit in it about Vogon poetry and how it was considered torture to listen to the poetry of such an officious and bureaucratic race. It was ranked third worst in the galaxy. Would you like to listen to that? Or would you prefer Emily Dickinson? How about opera? Which would you prefer? Sarah Brightman and Andrea Bocelli? Or Klingon opera? So that's why I think it's prevarication. The perfidy and bungling comes from the New Testament citations, because they're all quoting the Old Testament selections he already cited. All right, and he's not being upfront about it. That is the problem. All right, when you do that, now when you do what he did, it is our industry standard to be clear that it is quoting. One reason besides the honesty issue is that when the New Testament quotes the Tanakh, it is not the Masoretic text, the original Hebrew, but the Septuagint, the Greek translation of it. And while today when we read the Old Testament, when we just open it up and read it, we see the Masoretic text, not the Septuagint. All right, so there are differences. Professionals know this. But when you are presenting that sort of thing to laity, you should tell them. And not that I consider Roberts a professional, to be clear, but he is cosplaying as one. Again, Porthos, no, stop, don't do that. He's not happy with me. Again, the same stunt, at least he is consistent. The same stunt with the claim about a high altitude perspective. Daniel 4:11 is part of a prophetic dream that King Nebuchadnezzar is recounting to Daniel or Belteshazzar using metaphorical language, which is made clear by the lines asking for interpretation. Then, in 4:20, stop giggling, is Daniel reporting back to King Nebuchadnezzar the results of his interpretation of what he was told to him back in 4:11. And the meaning wasn't about the earth, it was about the stature of King Nebuchadnezzar anyway. The same instance counted twice. Did Roberts not notice, or did he hope that we wouldn't? He should have, or would have if he had actually read the verses around the pericope. Or maybe he wanted to hide the mystical and unrelation to flat earth nature of these citations. It is curious that Roberts didn't cite Isaiah 40:20 here. But let's deal with it anyway, because the real scholars have. Isaiah describes God sitting enthroned, looking down on the perfect circle of the earth. Now, the flat earthers would tell you, oh, yeah, that's got to be that has to be a flat earth in there because it's just a circle. However, now only a sphere looks like a circle when seen from any angle. And I have my Ingress XFAC coin here, so to represent the flat earth, the flat disk earth. Now, when we go from any other angle, you'll see it's not a circle anymore. Then there is Matthew 4:8, the temptation of Christ. Is Robert serious? Two beings with divine powers go high up, and does he not think that they couldn't see to the other side? It does not preclude that they were in motion, orbiting the earth. I recall a modern depiction of the temptation that was like this, but I forgot where I saw it or what it was called, what it was in. But the two of them were having the back and forth while the earth rotated below them. Or it could be that they were orbiting the earth while the earth did its normal 15 degree per hour drift. Thanks, Bob. Because it is a matter of perspective, with the camera holding on the pair. Next claim. Hell is a bottomless pit at the heart of the flat disk earth. He inserted the flat disk part, so he projected flat earth absurdity into this. He cited 4 pericopes in Revelation. Each said the same idiomatic phrase that has nothing to do with a supposedly flat earth. He is stretching to get to the confirmation bias. You padding the verse count, bro? I think you're padding the verse count. Claim. Everyone sees Jesus, citing Revelation 1:7. Okay, first, it's an allusion back to the prophet Daniel in the Old Testament. Next, does Robert think that Jesus is not able to make himself visible to everybody no matter what, if he had to? I mean, projecting human limitations onto divine powers? All right, and for some reason, Roberts cited Revelation 21:15-17, which describes New Jerusalem as a huge cube. I have a cube. Oh, forgot. Like a huge cube. I don't know why he cited it. I mean, it reminded me not just of that. It reminded me of a Borg cube, though, or Umber's Cuba. Next, some more of a flirt forcing his own definitions onto something that they have misunderstood and making a hash of it. An example of the Oakley Criteria. Here, Roberts highlighted references to breadth, which is the width of an object. But Roberts seems to think it means spread out flat. In doing my due diligence, I looked up what breadth meant, and the example given to illustrate the definition was a boat, which isn't, flat. But that hasn't stopped him so far from being inaccurate. Alright, Genesis 13:17. which is a reference to a specific area. And if you go back to verse 15, you will see, you'll see that they're talking about that specific area and not the entire earth. Hey, Porthos. All right, Job 38:18. It's part of God scolding Job for 4 whole chapters, putting him in his place, telling him that God has a lot of stuff on God's mind, and this pericope is the equivalent of you think you're so smart, you think you know everything? Isaiah 8:8 is a part of a prophetic sign saying that the Euphrates, which represents Assyria, will flood over Judah, which means invasion of Judah by Assyria. All right, but God will protect an area in the same sense as the earlier reference from Genesis. Isaiah 42:5 was cited for Roberts' assertion that spread out the earth is a proof of a flat earth. Again, spread out can be any shape. Ever watch Ace of Cakes? Duff and Jeff and the others, they would routinely spread out the fondant on many different shapes, including balls. All right. If it isn't properly spread out, then it would bunch and tear. So yeah, this goes beyond semantic stretching to semantic torture. Again, meeting the Oakley Criteria, as well as failing to recognize yet again the poetic nature of prophetic language. And then Revelation 29, which describes the gathering of the bad guys from all over, like in Lord of the Rings when Sauron gathered his armies to descend upon Gondor before continuing on to Middle Earth. I don't know, man. I don't know what he's getting at. Let me tag in here. The next claim is interesting. It's still wrong, and Roberts was being disreputable again, but it is more interesting than the rest of his rubbish. Roberts said that the pericope describes the voice of creation going out on a line through all the earth. Now, there is a conflict between the translations that the English is based on, specifically the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Hebrew, the Vulgate, that's Jerome's Latin translation of the Septuagint, and the Masoretic text, that's the original Hebrew, and the Syriac. So there are 2 versions of this text. One, the Vulgate and the Syriac says, "Yet their line goes out through all the earth." And the Masoretic and the Septuagint says, "Yet their voice goes out through all the earth." So what Roberts claimed was actually more an amalgam of the 2 versions, and therefore warped the pericope to meet his flat earth agenda. And on top of his underhanded fabrication, he also misapprehended the point, which was to describe the paradoxical way the knowledge of God is passed on, transmitted without speaking words in the customary way. Okay, I'm ready to keep going. And what I'm guessing was his mic drop moment, Roberts cited 2 Samuel 11:11 that says, quote, "flat earth" in the Matthew Henry's Bible from 1537. However, yet again, Roberts did not seem to think that people would check his work, because that verse is talking about a level plot of land, where earth is referring to the dirt on the ground. I checked the translation in parallel, and this was confirmed. I checked dozens of translations, in fact, in parallel, and they all gave one of 5 versions. I chose the most recognizable translation from each group to represent that version, lined up against the Matthew Henry. And honestly, if you read the preceding verses in the Matthew Henry and all the translations, there is still no confusion about what was being talked about. Furthermore, Roberts failed to provide the context, because I assume that it would be then disregarded by any rational person. See, in ancient warfare, they sought out a wide, flat area where they could fight. All right? And that is what is being referenced in the report by General Uriah on the location of the encampment of King David's army. And then I went even further by consulting the Matthew Henry Bible commentary to the Matthew Henry Bible. On this, I looked up this pericope in it, and there is no mention of this flat earth Meshuggah. He has done this so much that I propose calling this the Roberts Principle, making an erroneous claim and citing a source, assuming that no one will check. Now, Roberts claimed that Isaiah 40:4-5 is a flat earth prophecy and that it correlates to Revelation 1:7. In reality, it is Isaiah using prophetic language to describe wiping the earth clean of features like leveling mountains and filling valleys, all right, putting everything on the same level. But it really has nothing to do with a flat earth. One could do the same thing with a basketball, leveling the grippy bits and filling the grooves. It can happen with any shape, and it doesn't have to be a flat disc. And it is not considered connected to Revelation 1:7, but it is connected to Luke 3:4-6, parallel Matthew 3:3, and Mark 1:3. And this is how you properly cite synaptic verses, sir, just in case. And now, if you can believe it, Roberts really went off the rails, if he was ever on them to begin with, and this, so I mean this relative to everything else so far. He just says, quote, creation worshippers, and in parentheses, Helio-centric Sun-god Worshippers. So, I'm guessing that the following pericopes are against those believing in the reality of a globe Earth and the heliocentric model. The pericopes really have nothing to do with flat Earth or the shape of the Earth, not even close. But I did due diligence, and I will highlight just how off in left field Roberts is, considering how he himself is actually distributing ancient Egyptian polytheistic cosmology. Well, let's get this over with so we can move on to the good bits. Consider all of this so far the eating your veggies portions of this reaction. There's nothing for me here to really react to, so it's time to sub in the chaplain. If I must, this boy needs to go to the remedial Sunday school. Alright, Deuteronomy 4:19 is actually speaking against astrology and astrologers. The Bible is against all forms of fortune telling, in fact. Maybe Roberts mistook that with astronomy, because that is very different. And in context, this is about the commandment prohibiting the worship of idols and graven images. At this point, I should warn the Bible thumpers that if they venerate the Bible too much, they turn the Bible into an idol. So yeah, it maybe has already happened to some, but it's never too late to repent. Deuteronomy 7:13 refers to the Decalogue and the commandment prohibiting holding other gods above God. In context, it's directed against the pagan pantheons, which, ironically, the Bible misusing flerfers are actually doing this with their pushing of ancient Egyptian polytheistic cosmology. 2 Kings 23:5 is a description of King Josiah's reforms based upon the discovery of the book of Deuteronomy while renovating the temple. They found it in a wall, which was directed against the Canaanite pantheon, especially Baal, and Yahweh's ex-consort Asherah, that's the stick in the ground. Also the consolidation of worship in Jerusalem, the whole only one temple thing, reversing the policies of King Manasseh. Right, Jeremiah 8:2 refers to the ancient Near East practice of disinterring corpses of leaders when a treaty is violated. You can see this further in Josiah's reforms doing this. He desecrating Bethel, the location of the Samaritans' temple in the northern kingdom of Israel, erected in opposition to the temple in Jerusalem that was located in the southern kingdom of Judah. Remember, only one temple allowed. Alright, buckle up for this one. Acts 7:42-43 quotes the Septuagint translation of Amos 5:25-27. And it's a review of ancient Israel's disobedient relationship with God. Alright, there's a lot of pronouns and historical references. Alright, we got the tent of Moloch. The tent is the sacred space, like the tabernacle. And Moloch was an indigenous Canaanite deity whose worship included child sacrifice at the Tophet, or fireplace, in the valley of Hinnom, also known as Gehinnom in Hebrew, which we now call Gehenna, the metaphorical representation of hell, starting during the intertestamental period, the time between the Old and New Testament, and is used explicitly in this way. Raphan is a reference to Saturn, the pagan, not the planet, but the pagan deity. Images made to worship, again, the commandment against graven images. Remove you beyond Babylon is referencing the Babylonian exile, where Babylon conquered Judah and transported a whole bunch of people out of Judah and spread them out in Babylon. So yeah, this is what Roberts chose to cite to prove a flat earth. Alright, we got Acts 14:8-20 is the story of Paul and Barnabas in the Greek city of Lystra, considered to be a gullible backwater, and they were mistaken for Zeus and Hermes, similar to the story in Ovid's Metamorphosis. But anyway, this episode is usually portrayed comically, like something out of the life of Brian, except for the last two verses, in which involves stones being thrown in the direction of the apostles, which is also like the life of Brian. Alright, back to the pastor to react. I need a drink. Hey, not yet. Roberts claimed, and this is a direct quotation, this is Porthos, by the way. Lucifer, quote, Lucifer/Satan's conspiracy to unite the world against Jesus' throne, which is above the firmament. He cited 4 pericopes. Oh, you're happy, kitty. He cited 4 pericopes, none of which have anything to do with the firmament, or Jesus, or a conspiracy. Kind of like the joke about how the Holy Roman Empire was not holy, Roman, or an empire. He cited the Tower of Babel, a psalm sung at royal coronations, a mocking dirge celebrating the violent death of an Assyrian tyrant, that's right, that tried to displace God, and the Archangel Michael leading the angels to defeat the devil and demons at Armageddon. This is a really happy kitty here. I had noticed another pattern at this point, that sarcasm goes completely over Roberts' head. And to be clear, it's the most sarcastic one is the dirge. His last claim, before we get to the good stuff, was a bunch of citations about the inerrancy of the Bible, and has no place in a discussion of non-religious stuff. And the way it was framed was threatening and manipulative. In my opinion, I would say that Roberts is venerating the Bible to the point of idolatry if he wasn't disrespecting it so much. This is why people are so put off by Christianity. People like Roberts. And the same goes for Thompson. Malarkey like this. I can't see. The only real difference between them and the Westboro Baptists is volume level. Or between them and Kenneth Copeland and Joel Osteen is audience size. They are bilking people for money, and I remind them that the only time that Jesus lost his temper was when the money changers were bilking the believers outside the temple. Hey, you gonna settle down, buddy? Alright, with the tripe dispensed with, we have the important stuff, including the so-called firmament. Alright, what's up, buddy? You like my... What are you doing? Alright, with the tripe dispensed with, we have the important stuff, including the so-called firmament. There are a handful of verses that that scholars recognize as the commonly misused passages for flerf's arguments. They are these: Genesis 1:6, Job 38:5 and 12-14, Psalm 104:2, Isaiah 11:12, 40:22 and 42:5, and Revelation 7:1 and 27. Some of these have been addressed. Yeah, want to sniff that? Some have already been addressed, but I tried to hold off until this section. So let's go through Roberts's related claims with special attention given to those verses. While the Bible does not explicitly state what the shape of the earth is, Genesis 1:9 suggests a sphere. All the land and water gathered in one spot, all together. Geometrically, this only happens on a sphere. Therefore, you want to sniff this too? Therefore, Genesis 1 implies a round earth. Now, for the next three claims, the key pericopes are from the books of Job and Isaiah. And of course, Roberts added more of his flat earth foolishness. Anyway, Chaplain, give us a brief introduction to those two books to help everyone understand them and the stuff that Roberts ignored. Job opens the wisdom section of the Tanakh, or Old Testament, and its central theme is the possibility of disinterested righteousness, and asks whether virtue depends on a universe that operates by the principle of reward and punishment. It's in the form of a poetic drama, and it's not considered something that actually happened. Calm down, Nathan Thompson, let me finish. It is a lesson. Alright? Think of it as a really long parable, but with more drama and enough sass to make Dame Maggie Smith blush. Job is arguing with friends or neighbors, getting very sarcastic and self-righteous, and then God gives him a talking to, setting him straight. Isaiah opens the prophets section and is one of the major prophets, which is based on the length of the book, not its importance. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel are all long enough to get their own scrolls, while the rest of the prophets can all fit together on one scroll. Isaiah operated in the southern kingdom of Judah, and his prophecies were against Judah's various enemies, the northern kingdom of Israel, Assyria, and Babylon. It also deals with the restoration after the Babylonian exile. Prophetic language is used, and it's figurative and poetic, full of metaphors and creative descriptions. As we have seen, Roberts has been ignoring the forms, taking it amiss or misstating figurative language, and taking idioms literally. He's like Drax from Guardians of the Galaxy in this way. And to be clear, I am using a simile. I do not literally mean that Roberts is actually Drax. Just to be clear, because, you know. Alright, let's get back to this. Pastor, claim. Earth measurements unknown. I wish you could see Athos right now. He's being very cute and showing his belly. Claim, Earth measurements unknown. He cited Job 38, 4-5. God is sassily putting Job in his place after Job was whining at God. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Who determined its measurements? Surely you know. Or who stretched the line upon it? See how it sounds in its proper context? Hold on. Athos, don't eat that. Good boy. God is God, and Job is a lowly human, so knock it off. The same with Job 38:18. And taking measuring line means a flat earth and not a sphere is an overinterpretation. Lines can be straight or curved. In fact, if we engage in some wordplay, in nautical terms, a line is a rope, which is how one used to measure how many knots a ship was traveling. Also, you measure the diameter of a sphere with a straight-edged ruler. All right, Jeremiah 31:37, an oracle of salvation using the language of hymns. The part Roberts cited was actually about how the unfathomable character of heaven and earth guarantees Israel's continuation. All right, and then Proverbs 25:3. This was a clever edit by Roberts, or an inept one. Verses 2 and 3 together form a simile, but Roberts only cited half of it. It is the glory of God to conceal things, but the glory of kings to search things out, like the heavens for height, like the earth for depths, so the mind of kings is unsearchable. Sounds more like it advocates for the pursuit of science and knowledge. You see, it's not just what is cited, but what isn't. That's Hermeneutics 101. Claim. Earth measured with a line, not a curve, citing Job 38:45, 4-5 again. As we have already noted, it has nothing to do with an actual measuring line, and even if it did, a line can have any shape, and a line can be stretched over a curve, like a fishing reel or thread on a bobbin. This is an underhanded equivocation in my opinion. Hey Chaplain, you're up again. Alright. Finally, we have the biggest issue to deal with, the so-called firmament. That is one way that the Hebrew word rakia has been translated into English, but it also means expanse. According to the HarperCollins Bible Dictionary, for its entry on the firmament, it starts with, "You need to imagine a flat earth." So that's funny. It establishes right off that it is imaginary. So the firmament is the concept that there's a hard dome above us and enclosing a flat earth, holding back water, and is a real physical boundary. So I challenge you, put expanse in place of firmament when you read these verses and consider which word makes more sense. Where did this firmament idea come from? I know that as a kid, the firmament never came up in Sunday school, and without someone defining it like that, I assumed that it meant the sky, to infinity and beyond. If one starts off with the presumption of a solid dome, one will read that into the text, confirmation bias. Alright, so, back in the 3rd century BC, the Egyptian pharaoh requested a Greek translation of the Tanakh. So as the story goes, 70 Jewish scribes went off, each in seclusion, and did the translation. And when they finished, they gathered to compare notes and were surprised to find that everyone's translations matched exactly. Now, I know how this sounds, and I remember a rabbi at university said in response to this, when you have 2 rabbis, you get 3 opinions. Anyway, the scribes were influenced by Egyptian cosmology, while in the ancient Near East, to them, it was an expanse. And through the study of comparative religion, we know that none of their neighbors in the ancient Near East thought of it as a dome either. However, the ancient Egyptians believed that the earth was a flat square with mountains around the edge that supported a dome. So, once Alexander came through and making Greek the language to learn, and the Ptolemies ruled Egypt, they made Alexandria an intellectual center, attracting to it the scribes and their exposure to that belief and its influence. And the Septuagint was initially meant for the Greek-speaking Egyptians, and then it went out from there. So we start with the Masoretic text. The original Hebrew, rakia, was translated then into the Greek as stereoma, which had a connotation for hardness. And then Jerome comes along with his Latin translation published in AD 405 using the word firmamentum, meaning strong or steadfast support. And then the translators of the King James Bible just transliterated firmamentum into firmament. It's like basing an entire worldview on a game of biblical telephone. Roberts began the firmament section with, quote, the one in parentheses, firmament / dome / vaulted dome, and expanse created there and upon where God's throne exists, end quote. He needs a remedial English class as well, it seems. At least there are no space commas. He then listed off a bunch of verses and then expounded on them. He started with a psalm, but let's start at the beginning with Genesis 1:6-8, so we can understand what is going on with this firmament thing. Roberts said, with understanding the properties of water, it requires a physically hardened surface to keep it contained. Thus, a dome / firmament is not only logical, but is within the proper context of Scripture. Not really. Roberts is presupposing a flat earth, a bit of his confirmation bias, which would need a barrier to keep the waters from falling off, instead of gravity, which is how it's actually done. Now, you see, some flerfs think that Antarctica is actually an ice wall manned by NASA personnel with guns. Anyway, I've come to understand Roberts' methodology and process by slogging through this mess, And so I find it laughable that he is suddenly considering the context when he is demonstrably not so far. Also, that he does not understand the properties of water when he had issues with ice being water earlier. He also seems to have forgotten that clouds, fog, and humidity are all water in gaseous form, nor gravity for that matter. In my opinion, once you apply the Deuteronomical test to this pericope, expanse fits better and makes more sense with what we know about our world and what has been proven true by science through our God-given gifts. According to the Encyclopedia of Biblical Difficulties, which is one of the strictest literalists I've ever read, it says that this pericope describes the formation of an expanse to separate condensed moisture on the Earth's surface from those suspended in the sky. Sounds like clouds to me. It also states that the rakia does not really mean a beaten out canopy. Remember, there was a lot of parallelism going on in the ancient Near East with their writings, and none of them taught this notion in their concept of the sky. And so it just simply means a stretched out expanse. It further supported this conclusion about the firmament with Isaiah 42:5. Which Roberts cited in his initial list, but seems that he skipped in his explanation section, though he did mention it in an earlier claim, to be fair. In that pericope, the cognate form raka, number 7554, could not beat out or stamp out in connection with metalworking because of the parallelism with nata, number 5186, meaning to extend, as in curtains or tent cords, and the reference to the earth produces sitsa, number 6631, and that this word always refers to plants and animals. So rakia can only mean an expanse without a connotation of a hard metal plate. To add to this, there is consistency between Isaiah 40:22 and Psalm 104:2, both of which speak of stretching out the heavens. About the stretching, it too used the word that is connected with being spread out like a tent. Think about it. A tent has 3 dimensions. It can go out. And to complete the metaphor, heaven can keep going out like the tent stretching out. And then we have the Hebrew word for heavens, 8064, Shemayim, literally heavens. However, in Genesis 1:8, God explicitly calls the expanse heaven. And so equated rakia with Shemayim. And if the Hebrew word used for heaven is not rakia, but Shemayim, 8064, literally heavens. However, in Genesis 1:8, God explicitly calls the expanse heaven, and so equated rakia with Shemayim. If the stretched out nature of the rakia is what is intended, then expanse would be a more accurate and better translation than firmament. And in the context of Genesis 1, it makes clear that Moses intended rakia to be understood as sky, the atmosphere, and heavens or space above earth. In fact, in modern Hebrew, rakia is the word used for sky and has no connotation at all of hardness. Well, that should be that. But let's be thorough and professional with this, to leave no doubt about this list of hokum. And besides, how he tried to support a firmament displayed the same lack of ability, academic standards, and honesty he has so far displayed. In fact, his methods may have even gotten worse, if you can believe it. Now back to the pastor. Roberts cited 19:1 because it says firmament. However, if we use the concept of expanse instead and include verse 2, to me, it supports pursuing science. Now, at this point in my notes, I would have liked to have started to go off topic about the manufactured conflict between a religion and science that started in the 19th century. How the Bible says who and what, but science explains the rest. And I even wanted to get into Jonathan Edwards' spider letter. But all this should be its own video. But this is getting too long. Hold on. In brief, Jonathan Edwards was an 18th century congregational theologian and pastor. And in his spider letter, he described his observations of those spiders that let out a string to the point that the wind lifts them up and lets them fly. Because spiders weren't scary enough. Alright, he figured that it looked like a fun way to travel and concluded that since God created that, therefore God wanted us to have fun. That is an example of how the relationship between science and religion should be, not the manufactured conflict from the 19th century. The other reason for citing this seemed to be to threaten and manipulate the reader, using it to say that if you disagree with him, with Roberts, you're actually undermining God. You know, about 50 years ago, Roberts would have fit right in with cult leaders. Nathan Thompson pulls the same act, threatening people who disagree with him by quoting the scripture about tying a millstone around their neck and throwing them in the sea. Alright, Psalm 148, cited to support the argument that the firmament continued to exist after the Great Flood. I don't know. I don't remember hearing about any of this shit in Sunday school or undergrad or divinity school. Besides songs, psalms are songs, using poetic metaphors. I read waters above as referring to clouds. Now, Roberts continued his argument about the firmament is being stretched above our heads. He cited Job 26:7. The King James Version says, "He stretcheth out the north over the empty space, and hangeth the earth upon nothing." And so he asked, from the north, lowercase n, is being stretched, and stretches in quotations, over what empty space? This further shows either his faulty methods or trickery, as well as his confirmation bias. To start with, the north. Roberts treated it like a noun, and may also be confusing it with up, but I don't know. If he had used a more scholarly translation like the New Revised Standard Version, NRSV, the translator's footnote shows it to actually be a pronoun, because it is a euphemism for an actual place, which the NRSV uses in the text. The north, capital N, refers to Zaphon, which is the Canaanite equivalent of Mount Olympus. Now, that place, it's now called Jebel el-Akra, or Mount Cassius. Then there's the context. It's actually saying that there is no hiding from God, nor is there hiding from the chaplain. The next pericope used is also revealing. Job 37:18 in Roberts' commentary, it shows that he actually does know what is going on in Job. The next pericope used is also revealing. Job 37:18. In Roberts' commentary, it showed that he actually knew what was going on in Job. So he chose not to present that all the other times he pointed at Job. It references the sky being spread out, the sky's hard as molten mirror. Alright, Roberts was a little bit right about something in his commentary. It's like a broken clock. He noted that Job was being put in his place. However, he attributed the source of the scolding to God. And while that does happen in this book, it hadn't happened yet. The interaction with God starts in chapter 38. The speaker confronting Job in chapters 32 to 37 is actually Elihu, one of the three neighbors. Roberts made a big mistake there. And again, it's down to either being deceiving or not being cut out for exegetical work. So who is this guy, Elihu, that Roberts thinks is God? He is the youngest of the three neighbors, depicted as brash, and he's angry at the other two for not being able to show Job how wrong he is. He gives long prefaces, and his language is viewed as pretentious, coming off as a rather unattractive person. In terms of the whole book, the reader should have anticipated that Yahweh was going to step in after the second neighbor, but instead it was Elihu, giving a slightly different view of things. He gives 4 speeches, which scholars have described as boring. Roberts quotes from the final speech, which has been described as exalted and bragging. So Roberts ignored all the figurative language going on around the pericope. Now that, combined with verses 14 to 20, anticipated the entrance of Yahweh, and has led me to see Elihu at this point as a hype man. He worked the crowd for the grand entrance of Yahweh. So like in Hamilton, when Aaron Burr jumped on the balcony railing to introduce America's favorite fighting Frenchman, Lafayette. Another sidebar. I believe that the Bible should not be read in a boring monotone, but in a way that reflects what is going on, the context and the subtext, to help with the comprehension. Like in Jesus Christ Superstar. And also, Jesus was funny. He cracked a lot of jokes. They either just didn't translate, or it wasn't noticed when spoken in monotone. But that's going to be a topic for another day. Oh, and one more thing. Roberts described the molten glass as hard, but the dictionary defines molten as liquefied by heat. But I'm splitting hairs here. Alright, let's put on our big kid pants and buckle down. We're in the home stretch. And yes, I am using as much figurative language on purpose because, Come on! Okay, Roberts tried to make stretched out a thing. The part of the firmament fallacy that deals with the dome, citing Isaiah 45:12, Job 26:7, and Job 37:18, and claim that they are in agreement. Only partially right. Isaiah and Job 26 use nata, number 5186, while Job 37 uses raka, number 7554, which we already covered. Okay, so 5186, nata, is referring to a hand or arm stretching out. The pericope is Yahweh speaking to the only non-Israelite to be anointed a Messiah, King Cyrus the Great of Persia. And he's reminding him that his successes are because of Yahweh, that he should recognize Yahweh as the creator, and passes along his instructions. And another note, the heavens, Shemayim number 8064, means region above earth, the sky, the stars, air, and the invisible realm of God. And I can see why he rolled out the threat following this, considering the weakness of his argument. He did so by getting sanctimonious and defensive again, citing Romans 3:4, to say that anyone disagreeing with him is a fool and a liar. Which I find hilarious because the whole process of checking Robert's work has led me to see him as a fool and a liar. Now, Roberts posed a question about Isaiah 48:13. What is being spanned? Okay, Isaiah 48 is God warning God's obstinate people to pay attention this time because God the Creator is about to get them out of Babylon. So, what span? It's right there. God's hand reaching everywhere, which is the point of Isaiah's prophecy. Next, Robert says that the analogies of the firmament make no sense without a literal firmament, citing Ezekiel. Chaplain. Chaplain! What? Tell us about Ezekiel and take us through to the end of Robert's Dren, if you please. Right. Well, all the firmament arguments have been built upon a foundation of sand, but okay, let's beat that dead horse. Ezekiel is the craziest and most figurative of all the prophets in the Bible. According to the New Interpreter's Bible Commentary, Ezekiel is one of the strangest books of the Bible. Bursting with bizarre symbolism and sexually explicit language, the book seethes with divine fury, even while simultaneously offering some of the most powerful expressions within the Old Testament of God's desire to restore humanity and creation to wholeness. It also has God supposedly dropping an F-bomb in chapter 16, though it is not translated into English. In fact, Ezekiel is heavily modified in the English translations, mellowing the language to make it suitable for our gentle sensibilities. Make it suitable to read in church. Now, I think it is Taznuth, this one here. Maybe. This is a variant word for acts of lust, fornication, promiscuity, and commit whoredoms. And while it is used a bit throughout the Bible, within Ezekiel, it's only used in chapter 16, and in the other chapters they use a similar word. Now, honestly, chapter 16 is so vulgar, it should... Now, here are some of the craziest things Ezekiel did. He lied on his left side for 390 days to symbolize the 390 years that God's people sinned in the northern kingdom of Israel, and then turned over to lie for another 40 days to symbolize the additional years that God's people sinned in the southern kingdom of Judah. He laid siege to a brick, complete with towers, battering rams, and a pitched camp to symbolize the siege of Jerusalem. And he ate bread that had, for 390 days, that was baked using cow excrement to symbolize how God's people have become unclean. All this is just chapter 4. To take Ezekiel's analogies literally is just folly, and I don't want to hear it, Nathan Thompson, until you eat bread baked using cow pies. Besides, God's self, established early on in the book that Ezekiel is doing a lot of symbolic stuff. Daniel 12:3. Roberts thinks that only hardened surfaces can shine, not recognizing prophetic and poetic language. Also, I live in an area with lots of lakes. And I'm sorry, Porthos is just off screen and he's getting into my stoles. So I live in a place with a lot of lakes. And on sunny days, they seem shiny. And shiny can also be used to describe hair, for example. And what I'm trying to say is that shine is not exclusive to hardened surfaces. Amos 9:6a. And I'm surprised Roberts knew how to note a segment of a verse. He switched from King James Version to the English Standard Version. Why? Well, it's a cherry pick, which would be okay in my field and in hermeneutical studies if he had been upfront about it, explained why, and noted the alternatives. He did not, so I had to go find out. He wanted to use the word vault, but the King James Version used the word troop. Other translations used so he had a lot of options, and I will post a link to the parallel presentation down below. My read of the English is that Amos is speaking of heaven, either the physical features of or the collective entities of the heavenly host. And I did not bother with the Hebrew with this one because it was clear from the clause preceding this pericope that earthly features are not the subject. Roberts rejected the expanse concept, citing Acts 7:56, shifting to the New Testament, pointing to the phrase, "I see the heavens opened." I wonder if Roberts was picturing something like holodeck doors opening up on Star Trek. It's similar to an idiom, isn't it? Like the heavens or skies opening up to describe a heavy rain. Okay, last two verses. Revelation 4:6a, Roberts connected it to Job 37:18. First off, it's actually an allusion to Ezekiel 1:22, the celestial ocean, as well as invoking 1 Kings 7:23-26, which described the bronze basin associated with Solomon's temple called the sea. What's happening is it's trying to describe the heavenly throne of God. Do you think any of us could adequately understand or describe that? It's like near the end of the movie Contact, where Jodie Foster's character, when transported, tried to describe what she saw, but was having trouble and said, they should have sent a poet. And finally, Revelation 6:14 describes the sky vanishing like a scroll. So it's Roberts failing to see the simile being used by an ancient person with their perspective describing destruction. Alright, now I'm done with this guy, so back to the pastor to react. Thanks, Chaplain. You're a trooper. Alright, Roberts ended the Firmament section with another coercive and manipulative statement that anyone who rejects the firmament is rejecting God's word. If Roberts' arguments had any merit, such threats would be unnecessary. While going through and checking his work, I had difficulty telling if Roberts was being intentionally dishonest or naively ignorant, though because of his constant threats, I am leaning towards the former, but it could just be both combined. But what is clear is that Roberts is wholly unqualified to do serious exegetical work on the level that he is pretending to have. Like many flerfs, he exemplifies the Dunning-Kruger effect and is sitting at the peak of Mount Stupid. He has his website full of lies and threats, selling a book of untruths, apparel displaying his misrepresentations, and stickers that turn God into a laughingstock. He should be ashamed, but charlatans hardly change. Take, for example, Jim Bakker, who has had plenty of opportunities to change his ways, but he just keeps coming back to unchristian and fraudulent ways. But let's not take my word or the work of scholars. Let's ask a higher authority. Oh, Jesus, do you have a moment?
Hey, Chaplain, what's up?
I'm doing this debunk video about flat earthers. And this guy, Nathan Roberts.
That guy needs me. And that Thompson fool, too.
I know, right? Anyway, he's written this thing online and is selling a book saying that the Bible has over 240 references to a flat earth. You okay there?
Yeah. Hold on a minute. I don't have a table to overturn right now. But, hey, you. Any of y'all been pranking the humans down there that the creation's flat? Yeah, I know, right? That's so 1100 year of me. Who knows? Hey, you heard this? Any of you been pranking those humans? Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, right now, looks like none of us up here are responsible for that. You, might want to try downstairs. I mean, I know they've had their hands full and all with, you-know-who, but more than ask.
Okay, cool. So to be clear, is the Earth flat?
Nope. It's a globe.
Sure? Sorry.
Look, it's fine. Dad made it round. And the spirit says she swept over it.
Okay, thank you, Jesus.
Yeah, no problem. No problem, Chaplain. Well, you keep up the good fight.
Will do. Oh, Jesus, can you do the thing?
Yeah, sure thing. Signing out.
Well, there you have it. I hope that this information will prove useful to those who have to debate or interact in any way with flat earthers who are misusing the Bible. The big thing is the firmament. It's based on a translation mistake. The original Hebrew says expanse and sky. It's actually ancient Egyptian polytheistic creation myths that came up with this dome concept. Please help call them out to stop them from dragging religion into this and making a mess of everything. Lastly, I would like to say directly to Roberts and Thompson and all the others who are misusing the Bible to support their wacky conspiracy theories. It's because of people like you making statements like this that is so off-putting to people that it drives people away from God. You are hindering the work of the shepherd's real sheepdogs. You are not helping. It's not just that you are charlatans, but you're bad at it too. And for some reason, you've been able to lead a few astray, away from Jesus and toward ancient Egyptian polytheism. You are truly wolves in sheep's clothing and must be rejected and ideally be helped back onto the path of Jesus and reconcile yourself with God. So please, just knock it off, literally, for Christ's sake. Thank you for watching this Pastor Reacts, Chaplain Explains video on everything wrong with the Bible misusing flat earth conspiracy theorists. If the Spirit moves you to utilize this channel, that's great, you know what to do, but if not, that's fine too. Thank you again for stopping by and have a good day. Peace.